Hello, Milkers. Happy Pride, Mama. Can you believe it is the gayest month of the year? Yes, it's June. Well, for Ian, Juan, and I, that could be debatable, but alas, we're here. We're excited to celebrate it with you guys, and we're very excited for this episode because we get to sit down today with Amanda Montell. And if you don't know who Amanda is, well, baby, get in. We're going for a ride. She's a New York Times bestselling author and iHeartRadio award-winning podcaster. Her nonfiction books include Cultish, Wordslut, and the Age of Magical Overthinking. Amanda's books have been praised by publications including The Atlantic, The Economist, and NPR. Yeah, real smart people shit. Her podcast, Sounds Like a Cult, was named a Best Podcast of 2022 by Vulture, Esquire, and Marie Claire, and won the 2023 iHeartRadio Award for Best Emerging Podcast. Her newest podcast, Magical Overthinkers, premiered in May 2024 and is ranked among Apple and Spotify's top 10 society and culture podcasts in the USA. So before you go listen to those and read those books, as you should, please sit and listen to this wonderful episode with Amanda Montell. Here we go.
Hi, Milkers. Welcome back to Tres Leches, the podcast where three Latina friends tell stories, unpack identity, and get real about everything from pop culture to politics.
It's sweet, it's a little messy, and always drenched in milk.
3 kinds of milk, in fact.
And the best part is, you can enjoy our milk even if you're lactose intolerant.
Rate, like, subscribe, and share with someone who gets it. Or needs to. Okay, so your wedding is in 5 days.
Congratulations.
Are you on the verge, or are you like kind of
Yeah, how are you
dissociating?
feeling?
I'm like on a new SSRI, so I am chilling.
Oh, yes. Chilling like a villain.
Chilling like a villain, honey. You know, famously, I need to stop saying famously because, like, anywho, I do try to chill like a villain because my style icon, my personality icon, the person I try to emulate in all things, maybe even this wedding, is Captain Hook.
Ooh.
Wait, explain that.
You dark horse.
I will struggle too. Well, you know the trope that like Disney villains are all gay coded. You know, Divine
Yes.
is Ursula, Jafar, hello.
Yeah.
Dr.
But-
Facilier, all of them.
All of them. Captain Hook, though, like always spoke to me, like even as a very young child. I dressed up as him for 4 Halloweens growing up.
4 work.
I just loved his ostentatiousness matched with his tenderness. Because he's such a little wuss, you know? He's so scared of that tick-tock clock and the alligator or crocodile. Pardon me. So anyway, Captain Hook is not an inspiration for, you know, all of the pageantry that I engage in. So I am always trying to chill like a villain.
Yeah.
Got it.
I love that.
Especially this week.
Oh my
You're
gosh.
making me want to have to go watch Peter Pan again because I'm feeling like it's not on the like top 4 of like my
It's
And for good reason.
Disney's.
I mean, it is iconic. We do have notes, you know, like it aged like milk, so to speak, in some respects.
Yeah.
But Captain Hook is not to mix Disney references here, but a tale as old as time. He is an icon.
Yeah. And Dustin
Sorry.
Hoffman played him wonderfully in Hook, the live action.
That is that's
Thank you for mentioning that. That's undersung. Sorry, I didn't mean. I'm not a Disney adult. Let me like put that forth.
Same. But there was a time where the Disney that was being made, it's like if you're a film person or just have good taste, like if you like those films, you're just someone who has good taste.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
Also,
I
we
would
are-
say so.
We are
Yeah.
millennialing so hard right now.
I love it.
I know. I'm so sorry. Like, excuse me. Should we just all get our Harry Potter house out of the way?
Exactly.
I'm kidding.
I'm embarrassed by mine. I'll
Really?
Yeah,
Are
but
you
I'll share
Slytherin?
it. No, if it was Slytherin, I'd be like, that would make so much sexy sense. But like,
But Ian, I have
Guys.
to ask, like, why can't it just be whatever you want it to be?
well, that's
Who gave it to
Yeah.
you? That,
The
that
house.
with such
The hat,
authority?
the
The
sorting
sorting
hat.
hat, dear.
I know, but
At-
where? But
Whoa.
which
I
sorting
went to that
hat?
Harry Potter website when that was all
Okay.
like,
Oh, yeah.
it was
Okay,
kiki,
okay,
and it was
got
like,
it.
we go here, we come to this place for literal magic.
Yeah.
And I went for the magic, and it gave me. I believe the first time I did it,
It was Hufflepuff. Just say
It was Hufflepuff.
It's
it was
okay.
Hufflepuff.
It's okay.
It was
It's okay.
Hufflepuff. But then I took it again, and then it was like, well, maybe you're a Ravenclaw, and I was like, wait, I get to pick, so I'm just picking, and I'm A Gryffindor.
Okay.
I was reminded
We all
recently.
contain multitudes, you know?
Correct.
I was reminded recently of something that was just so peak early millennial and so gay. I went to Stage Door Manor, like the theater arts camp in the Catskills, and we would sort each other. But there was like a double entendre, a triple entendre with what house you were, and it kind of alluded to like how out you were, right? So if you were Slytherin, you were like fully out. If you were Ravenclaw, you were lesbian.
I'm telling you, like the gay villain trope, it's
Yeah,
inescapable.
so that was all there. But anyhow.
Speaking of magic, I love a transition.
Ooh, that was slick.
She's the Barbara Walters of transition.
Right.
For sure.
I'm so
Literally.
excited to have you here, Amanda. I first came to know of you because I picked up your book. First of all, we got to talk about how damn good you are at naming books, honey. You are the marketing is marketing.
I can't waste a good title.
Thank you so much. You know what? Sometimes like a hater or two will come forward and be like, these books aren't even all that. They're just well marketed. And I'm like, and thank you.
Thank you for the compliment.
And thank you. Like, who do you think is in charge of this? The publishing industry? Babe, come on.
No.
But,
That's part of this.
Yeah, and that's that hater, I don't wish them anything well, but I will say this, like, for so long, I'm just like, I love to learn. And, sometimes learning can be a little overwhelming, but the way that you write about things that are so big and like complex, but you make it so fun and exciting, and you use such personal anecdotes. It really is. I was like, if I had a teacher like this in every subject, I would have been the baddest bitch in school. I would have been so happy to go. So I really just have to say, like, give you those flowers to be like, you are doing the Lord's work.
Stop. That's so
Lordess.
meaningful. Yeah, the podcast dress.
Lord as in the singer. Yes.
Captain Hooker. Sorry. I appreciate
I'll be that for
that's
Halloween. Sorry, that's me every day, actually.
yeah, that's you on a daily basis.
Correct.
I appreciate that so much. That's everything I hope for these books to be, like I write them in my my true voice. I am also that person who loves to learn, but who doesn't think it necessarily has to be so dry. And I also have to tell you, I was shooketh to the core when I saw you post the Age of Magical Overthinking on Instagram, I think it was, or when I saw you follow me, because I am such a fan. I loved you in Queer as Folk. One of my best friends was an Outfest fellow that year that the show aired.
Oh, wow.
And so I watched the pilot, I think, when it was screened at the Ace Hotel, was it, downtown?
Oh, yeah.
I was like her +1.
Oh, my God.
And I loved it, and I watched the whole thing, and I obviously love hacks. And so anyway, I was just like, when I saw that you followed me, I was like, okay.
Magic. We would call that magic.
I'm
Not
dead.
to get too woo-woo, but maybe...
Yeah,
I swear she manifested it.
It might have been. Yeah,
It
I
may-
think it was manifest.
And
Your
it's
psychological budget was open to him.
Work
and
psychological budget.
Okay, I like that turn of phrase.
Yes.
Come on, rebrand.
Yeah,
wrote that.
I mean, well, we're here now, and I'm just like so excited because there is so much that we want to talk to you about. I mean, and Ian brought something up when we were talking individually about why you are the way that you are. Ian talk to her about.
Yes, thank you, Barbara. I thought what was so kind of interesting, I always love like someone's story before the product. I have of you this book, but then you talked about your mom.
The origin story.
The origin story. And you talked about Miss Debbie, Deborah?
Denise,
excuse me.
Denise the Manise.
Miss Denise Montell, and just her accolades and, the curing of her own cancer, and that, like, now a fucking treatment that is like a treatment that's offered for everyone now was because she created it. And just that idea of being born into a family of science, but then also someone who like thinkers, but who are just making something, right? Like, even if maybe you were an actor's kid, whatever, it doesn't matter. But like, I was curious about how growing up in a house like that influenced you as a writer. Like, was
Oh
that
my God.
was that
What
your
a beautiful
influence,
question.
or like?
Yes, no one ever asks me this kind of thing.
Really?
I
Like,
I'm the Diane Sawyer of this podcast, actually.
Okay, we got Diane Sawyer, we've got Barbara Walters.
Hoda Kotb.
No, Juan is Wendy Williams.
Oh, yes, for sure.
Okay, Wendy. Oh God, Wendy's gonna roast me later. But yeah,
We're gonna talk
what
about
a beautiful question.
boyfriends.
Okay, yes. Okay, so yeah, my parents are research scientists. They come as a package deal. They are like attached at the hip, two-headed Hydra vibes. I love them dearly. But I guess when people ask me about my family, they most often ask me about my dad, because in my second book, Cultish, I talk about how part of my interest in cults was due to the fact that my dad was raised in one against his will. My dad spent his teenage years in a cult called Synanon, which some may have heard of because of a docuseries or memoir, but it was this like alternative drug rehabilitation center turned socialist utopian experiment turned exploitative destructive commune.
Yeah.
You know, classic.
Classic.
Classic
It was
peg.
the 70s.
Truly.
Yeah. And so I mean, the irony of his experience there was that my dad, when he was a teenager, was tasked with running Synanon's microbiology lab. That's, you know, that was like his sanctuary on this compound where very little else made logical sense. It was kind of like this one tiny room where the rules of empirical logic applied. So he really came to fall in love with laboratory science in that environment. And so he, you know, escaped the cult when he was 17, went to college, which is a crazy story as well, because he had no guidance on like where to matriculate. You know, the cult was not exactly encouraging that sort of thing. So he just applied to the two closest schools. One was a community college called Chico State. The cult was in the Bay Area. And one was UC Berkeley. He did not know the difference, but he got his Berkeley letter first. And so he went to Berkeley.
Wow.
Look at that.
A lucky guy.
And then, you know, he got truly was so lucky. And then he got his PhD, and then he was working in a lab when he met my mom, and she was working in laboratory science as well. She is now a developmental biologist. My dad is a neuroscientist. You know, idiots, as you can imagine. Just cretins. No, but I grew up, you know, on my dad's stories of this cult. And I also grew up in a household that kind of, you know, violently ricocheting against that sort of like mystical, irrational ideology was, you know, very focused on skepticism and empiricism. And, you know, that doesn't mean that, you know, my parents can't like enjoy a bit of ritual here and there. You know, my mom does yoga and like stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, and I had like a ultra reform, culturally Jewish upbringing, but with, you know, with like a grain of salt, all that stuff. But I definitely grew up in a household where the love of learning was a priority. It was very present. But I was kind of like not the black sheep, although I was kind of angsty in my teenager, so I might have put it that way at that time. But I was definitely like the theater kid of the family.
Yeah.
I was like the peacock, if you will, the kind of drama queen of the bunch.
How many are there?
There's my parents and my brother, but they are maybe three-headed Hydra. My parents and my brother are like temperamentally like more similar. And so I kind of stuck out as a sort of the melodramatic, I don't know, sore thumb.
The feeler.
Yeah, the feeler. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So I discovered my love of learning in a kind of different capacity, you know, like when I was growing up, I sort of saw myself as like the rebel of the family. And so I thought, you know, like science and those sort of more like left brain fields of study are like, those are for my parents. And like, I want nothing to do with academia. But in college, I studied linguistics and creative writing. And so I fell in love with researching in that way. But I knew that I didn't want to go into academia. I wanted to go into something creative. And in college, I started telling people that I wanted to be a pop linguist when I grew up and like write about linguistics for general audiences. That was met with some head scratching. People were like not super enthusiastic about that. People were like, pop linguist, who is she? It didn't make sense. So I was like, okay, you know, I'll figure something out. And then there was a whole journey, but now I write these sort of like fun social science books that, you know, the average reader might not pick up, but I think that like the colloquial voice makes them a little more accessible than.
Oh, honey, well,
a book
I'm as
written
average
by-
as you get, and I'd be picking
No,
those books up. You know what I'm saying?
So untrue.
It's no,
That is
because
so untrue.
it's. I mean, I am one of those people that loves like. You can ask these girls. I love to talk about like why people, like why do we, and one of the things that I wanted to ask you about was because I always say like we live in a culture that prioritizes and rewards know-it-alls, and we don't prioritize not knowing enough. And I feel like one of the reasons we like go to wars for so many years, or we have so many issues, is because people can't just say like, I actually don't know the answer. I
That's
actually
right.
don't know. And that's one of the things I love about your books, is that it gives like an insight into why we are that way and why we can't, so what I was going to ask you, like, what do you think is going on with that lately, especially?
Ooh, okay. So I guess I'll sort of like set up the premise of the Age of Magical Overthinking, which is like my last book, to kind of give people a little bit of exposition. But basically, every chapter of the book is dedicated to a different cognitive bias, which is a term that was coined by the behavioral economists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. And it describes a sort of deep-seated mental magic trick that we've always played on ourselves as human beings to help make sense of the world. Like the human mind today is the same as it was, 10,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago. We're operating on like OS hunter-gatherer up here, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the human mind developed so many sort of psychological shortcuts to help make sense of the world enough to survive it, to help reconcile our limited time, memory storage, cognitive resources. And, over the past few decades, hundreds of cognitive biases have been described. And, some of them might sound familiar, like confirmation bias or sunk cost fallacy or zero-sum bias, but truly dozens and dozens of more have been described, some of which have these cool names like the IKEA effect and the halo effect.
Oh my God.
And
Halo effect.
oftentimes, I think about it every day.
I'm thinking about it more now after we're going to talk about it.
I can't wait to talk about it. I can't wait to talk about it because as public figures and as podcasters, I'm sure you have thoughts about parasocial relationships and, expectations that people have for you and things like that, which relates to this bias, the halo effect. But anyway, as I was researching and writing my second book, Cultish, which is about the language of cults from Scientology to SoulCycle. So interpreting the word cult in this kind of loose way and, exploring how this wide range of cultish groups use language as the ultimate form of power. I kept coming across all of this literature about cognitive biases and how they played into cult influence and cult affiliation. But I couldn't help but notice how closely they related to irrationalities I was seeing in everyday life, including in my own behavior and also in the zeitgeist. So that's really where the seed was planted for my next book, The Age of Magical Overthinking, which dedicates every chapter to a different cognitive bias and uses it as a lens to explore some phenomenon of modern day digital age irrationality, whether we're talking about, the intense cycles of celebrity worship and dethronement that we're seeing, or mass embrace of like Instagram manifestation gurus, which we were kind of joking about earlier, or just a simple question like, why, despite living in the information age, does life only seem to be making less sense? That seems counterintuitive or paradoxical. And, to your question, Johnny, I knew that one of the biases that I wanted to cover in the book was overconfidence bias. Mm-hmm. I had vaguely heard of the phenomenon, the Dunning-Kruger effect, which describes, and it's not exactly how it sounds. I would discover when I looked into it more closely, but it's one of these phenomena that like pundits and social commentators will throw around to sound kind of like smug and like smarter than the people they're critiquing. It describes this phenomenon this alleged phenomenon wherein the less you know about a subject, the more you think you know. Mm-hmm. And so you can immediately write off someone who's like yapping their flap about X, Y, and Z, whether it's something as low stakes as
Joe Rogan. Oh, sorry.
I don't know. Yes, literally. So exactly, that is a perfect example. It would be like, oh my God, like Joe Rogan has only achieved his level of success and influence because of the Dunning-Kruger effect. And, you know, I thought to myself, like, surely if I'm smart enough to be aware of the Dunning-Kruger effect, then it can't apply to me. And then my ass was really handed to me. It was handed to me throughout the writing of this book, which was humbling and is my favorite feeling, low-key, because, you know, it's something that, like, studying linguistics and then later, you know, interviewing social science experts has taught me is that, like, it is so much more fun to move through life from a position of curiosity rather than like pedantry and judgment, you know, because then you get to feel like more forgiving of other people and yourself. And this kind of sounds after school especially, but I really mean it. Anyway, so I like started looking into the Dunning-Kruger effect, and I came across some sort of like re-examinations of this phenomenon that said that like it's not really just people who don't know very much who overestimate their intellectual capabilities. It's actually everyone. It's just that so-called experts might do it across like a narrower spectrum. But like just because my mom is a developmental biologist and like helped come up with her own treatment plan for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma that was then later, you know, incorporated as a standard protocol. She is one smart cookie. But just because she did all that doesn't mean that she's not going to overestimate her knowledge of like how to take care of plants or like, you know, something else.
Yeah.
So then I discovered this bias called overconfidence bias, which is defined by characteristics like, you know, overcrediting yourself with positive outcomes and like overestimating honestly, like out of literally like human nature, baby. Like it is like this deeply ingrained cognitive bias that I think, to like the point that we're already discussing, really encouraged and exacerbated by individualistic society, specifically in the information age. There is this almost like capitalistic pressure to know everything under the sun. There are incentives to expressing overconfidence on a subject on social media. We reward overconfidence or like talking out of your ass, you know, not to be crude, but in our business leaders and our politicians, like we literally reward.
He just shoots from the hip. Yeah, it's like very
Yes. And you know, we have axioms in our culture like fake it till you make it, you know?
Yes.
You know, in like TikTok culture, where if you literally just like keep shooting your shot and keep re-uploading the same joke, like eventually the algorithm might bless you. There is almost more of an incentive than ever not to sort of like take slow, deliberative time to learn about something, but to be reactive, to be like hyper, you know, like hyper confident in your delivery because you may be rewarded handsomely for that. So I was just interested in exploring, you know, where is the boundary past which confidence becomes no longer an asset to you but actually dangerous, and you know, how does overconfidence manifest in women, you know, in particular, because you can think like, oh, like women have so much imposter syndrome, surely overconfidence bias can't apply to us. But then I came across all this really interesting research suggesting that women might actually have more moral overconfidence than men, and might, you know, be a little bit more morally punishing. And not to be, you know, gender binary about this overconfidence stuff, but anyway, that stuff all fascinated me, and it was, writing that chapter was an invitation to experience what it would feel like to say more in conversation, like, I don't know, I need to learn more. And that's been really, again, I think it's helped like take down the temperature on a lot of my conversations in my personal life.
Yeah, it's also interesting, like on social media, when you think about like hive mind and like being rewarded for knowing, and it's like, and every week there's a new thing that if you're not posting about, if you're not, I see so many TikTokers or just people on Instagram is like, here's what I think about Patti LuPone. It's like, or what if you don't have a take? Like what, you know, I mean, we all personally might, but what is the point of like, and I'm guessing the reward is people will follow you and they'll like your videos if you have something to say.
He or she who takes first and has the hottest and hardest take is often the victor, and we're rewarded for it.
Totally. I mean, there are so many supplementary biases that pair with overconfidence bias to create a real shitstorm of misinformation and sort of maybe rewarding the wrong public figures on social media. For example, another one that I document in the book is called the illusory truth effect,
Yes.
or our tendency to think that something is true just because we've
most
heard
recent?
it repeated multiple. So that's
Oh.
that's a recency bias. Recency, yeah,
Got
and
it.
that's related. But the illusory truth effect is essentially describing like the power of repetition to make
Yep.
something false seem true, and it sounds like deceptively simple, and it stems from a good place. I mean, like you can imagine a time in human history when the only information you would be getting would be like word of mouth information from your IRL community, and
Yeah.
if enough people told you like, don't go near like those red berries, they're poisonous, that was like reason enough to believe that that was true. And even if it wasn't, like it was safe enough for survival purposes to heed that advice. But in environments where there is a lot of ambient like nonsense, like on social media, and I'm leaning here on an interview that I conducted with a memory scientist named Lisa Fazio, who's done a lot of research on the illusory truth effect. This bias becomes really dangerous because it's embedded, you know, in us from a really young age. It's the sort of bias where like even if you're, you know, told that it exists, it won't prevent it from having an effect on you. And it's related to something called the rhyme is reason effect, where we perceive statements as more true when they rhyme. So there was this one study that found that participants rated the phrase woes unite foes as more truthful as woes unite enemies, literally just because it rhymes, even though they mean the same thing. So you can imagine, like, if a figure on social media, same, I'm just like, damn, we are all so simple up here. Like, we just like, there's too much information, right? We're living in a time when it's too hard to process all of these things. And so if you see something heavily repeated using a linguistic tactic like rhyme, which makes it feel more like easy to organize in your mind, it just clicks really well with the human brain, then you're going to be more likely to believe it. So if some, you know,
Gotta start rhyming on my TikToks.
literally start rhyming on your
Start
fucking
rhyming on my
TikToks.
TikToks. Okay.
Literally, I swear
Verse.
to God. I mean, I titled that chapter "Haters Are My Motivators," and I've been trying to embed that message into my whole heart and soul.
Yeah.
But like, it is hilarious, like how simple the human mind is and how easy it is to manipulate it. Another like scary point that, sorry to like just like yap on end, but I never tire of talking about how like all of these biases combined. Another fascinating study that I came across actually while writing Cultish, but I incorporated it into this work too, is that one, you know, famous 2018 MIT study found that it takes a piece of true information 6 times longer to spread on Twitter than a piece of false information. And that's because false information feels more novel, and novel information is more engaging, you know? And so like negativity, falsehood, rhyming phrases, legible fonts, like these are all the things that an ill-intentioned Instagram grifter or politician or podcaster, could use to like build their own clout.
Yeah, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats is
Yes,
not like we all were like, that's not true,
Yeah.
but like it traveled. The TikTok audio sound did numbers. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like it's stuff like that you're like Leah Michelle can't read. It's not true, but you know what I
But
mean?
it is delicious to think about.
I know, but here's a hopeful sentiment. I spoke to a folklorist for that illusory truth effect chapter named Tom Wold, who was telling
his
me
number.
about like he's kind of cute.
Wait a minute now.
At least in that like faculty photo. Who knows how old it is? But anywho, I'm just like, Daddy, tell me about the illusory truth effect. Not it's giving sapiosexual. Anyway, those interviews were just happening over the phone. I'm like, if you're dropping bars about cognitive biases, my heart will open. My heart,
Words
my
and
loins.
words.
Truly. So he was telling me about some of the techniques and like emotional responses that make a piece of information travel more easily. And one of them is humor. So even though like an awareness of illusory truth effect won't make you immune to it. You kind of can fight fire with fire, and you can repeat true information in the way that like conspiracy theorists do, and you can make it funny, and you can turn it into a little song, you know, like you can fight fire with fire in that way.
Already coming up with a song in my head right here. I'm like, okay, thank you.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's basically what you're doing with your books, is that like when you're talking about Swifties and Taylor Swift, you're talking about something that's very real, like the halo effect, but you're making it fun to read, because I'm like, oh my God, that's me. I mean, not with Taylor Swift, but that's me with Beyonce. Like the way that I see Beyonce is just, it's just insane, but it's, and the parasocial relationships of it all. It's like, you could be just, a TikTok creator that doesn't even have millions of followers, and people will look to you for, they'll think you have, more. They think you're cooler, and it's like, it's such an interesting.
I also to piggyback on that, you mentioned, and I thought this was an interesting way of kind of like how it hooks into why we deitize, I'm making up a word here, but like
Love.
No, that-
Very like
deitize
wicked
is a-
coded.
Yes, that was. Congratulations.
It's deify, but I like deitize
deify,
better. And
okay.
literally,
It's more
like, it's my
active,
favorite.
frankly.
Straight up, and it's my favorite thing. And now, like, Wicked, literally, like, and obviously I saw the Broadway musical long before the movie, so this is like top of mind and always in my mind.
Yeah.
But I think it's like a
rent-free, as
hilarious.
some would say.
Rent free indeed. It's like a hilarious linguistics joke to me to like mix up the suffixes of verbs. So it's like,
Oh yes.
deitize and stratify is its own. Never mind. I'm gonna stop.
I follow. AKA the English language
You know,
is your bitch. And
Thrillifying,
you could do-
for example.
Again, genderizing that as well. If
Genderizing.
it sounds
Awesome.
like what I mean, I say it. You know what I mean?
Period.
So like,
I love that.
that was so much more fun. No, that was way funner than
Funner.
I thought. Funner.
Period.
Funner's a good word. Put
It
that
is.
in Merriam-Webster dictionary.
Yes,
Miriam,
ma'am.
yes.
I mean, this is how words enter the dictionary, because
Yeah.
it's
Bootylicious,
a
hello.
grassroots effort. Yeah, hello. It's a grassroots effort to get it in there. Knock,
Critical
knock.
mass.
Merriam.
And so all of that beautiful, I'm glad we had a little comedic respite there, getting us into what you say around the aiding us in our identity and how we attach to these figures, or but it doesn't have to even be as you're an adult and it's like, the celebrity thing, but like when what you talk about it with your mom, you're
Yeah.
like, she was kind of like your first deity,
Yeah.
this person who you idolized and who you saw as so smart and all the things, but then you compare why you thought and were so drawn to your girlfriend's moms, like the Gilmore. I loved how you described that your friends had a very Gilmore Girls vibe relationship with their mother, and how off the cuff the dad was, and how kind of like they what'd you say? Oh God, like fishermen. You're like fishermen, like that they ran after. Like, they just like. They don't care about what they were saying, and it was like different from your house, and and just this idea that like how we attach to a figure, the Beyonce for Johnny or anything like that, is representative of how we are aiding to try to build our own identity. I just thought that was
Yes.
the way you worded it was just very like, again, helpful to kind of be aware of. Like,
Well, it's just so I loved writing this book so much, because it was mind-blowing and so validating to learn how there are labels and like behavioral economics explanations for why we behave in certain ways in pop culture and the zeitgeist. Like, the halo effect is not, typically discussed in like academic literature in the context of Taylor Swift, although I did come across some amazing studies about celebrity worship that I cited in the book. But
Yeah.
the second I learned of the halo effect, I was like, holy shit, I have got to talk about this in the context of fandoms. But then like I quickly thereafter like related it to my own life and my relationship to my mom. I guess for some context, I'll just say that the halo effect is this phenomenon, this like universal phenomenon where we make positive assumptions about a person's character overall character based on our admiration of one single trait. So, you know, in the context of a pop star, you know, we like Taylor Swift's lyrics, so we immediately jump to conclusions that she must be nurturing, educated, worldly, that she maybe aligns politically with our values, that she cares about the same, you know, marginalized groups that we care about, even if there's like little to no evidence to suggest that that's true. And it stems from, you know, millennia of the ways that we used to find role models for survival purposes. Like,
My favorite part of the book.
right? Isn't this like, I was shooketh when I learned about this.
Is there a opposite? Because I, you know, like, let's say a celebrity says something that you're like, oh, that's not what I would think, and then it goes the opposite way, where it's like, you know, I'm using Patti LuPone just as a recent reference because she's in the zeitgeist right now. But like, you know, her calling another Broadway actress who happened to be a black woman a bitch, which we all, you know, all of us here probably know that that's not what you do. Like, that's hello, read the room. But I did see a lot of people calling her, you know, all of these things and saying she must be this, she must be that, based on this one instance. And I'm just using that as an example. But like, you know, we see people like, oh, that person looks like a Republican. They definitely hate LGBTQ people like that. And then you like talk to them and you're like, oh, they're actually liberal, you know?
Right. So this is what I'll say about that, and this is how it connects to like the mothering aspect of all of this, which was like a connection I was kind of trying to draw in the book, is that, you know, in this very parasocial age, populations that have experienced incredible isolation, and particularly who don't have strong parental figures or, you know, community authority figures in their real life, might turn to parasocial role models to fill that void. And several studies have found that those individuals might demonstrate what in psychological literature is called splitting, where you divide people into either like angels beyond reproach or disgraced demons. And when it comes to these like parasocial surrogate mothers, you know, like there is a reason why, you know, derived from the, you know, language from ballroom culture, you know, you'd have like your house mother, your drag mother, and that has really been adopted by pop culture, where like Taylor Swift is mother, Kate Blanchett is like aunt, step on my neck, whatever.
Oh my God.
But like this idea of chosen family has extended to celebrities, which is like a little bit trippy and dystopian when you think about it. But there's a reason why that language has gone there. And when your, you know, parasocial surrogate mother, you know, betrays you, at least through the lens of the halo effect, there's no way to sort of mend that rift the way that my mom and I were able to mend our rifts, because the relationship is one-sided, and nothing that person could ever say publicly could necessarily like remedy that perceived deal breaker or betrayal. And so particularly like female public figures, and, you know, the more marginalized the identity of a certain public figure, the sort of narrower their margin of error and the more heavily we deitize them. But the more we lift them up onto that pedestal, the further that they have to fall. So, you know, we can see the disparity in how, you know, female pop stars are treated when they commit some kind of infraction that might not even be an infraction versus male public figures. And I was just so fascinated by like how these familial tensions that have been historically associated with the halo effect now apply to our relationships to pop stars and celebrities.
Yeah.
I mean, I do it with boys. I don't just do it with boys.
Yeah.
You do
I'm
do it,
serious.
boys.
A little bit, you do.
Specifically, one person who I literally think about every day, who is like representative of this form and identity. There's something about him and why he holds space, I would say rent free, but I'm paying his rent for him. Truly. And I'm over budget, but like
we're in the red.
Yeah, very, very much so. But yet the red is the obsession of it has also gotten me like to turn up like, okay, he looks like that, he's super tall, but he has this vibe. So if that's his vibe, I will make myself that vibe.
Wow.
Well, but wouldn't you say that it
Is
has
it-
also to do because there's been rejection?
Oh, are we talking about the same person?
Are we talking about the same person?
Well, I'm saying, has there been rejection? Is this a person you know, or is this just a truly an idea of someone?
No.
like,
This is a person I
never
know.
even met?
This is a person I know.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's so funny that you bring this up because I too had that thought like after I finished writing that chapter. I was like, how do parasocial relationships relate to like dating apps and crushes? You know what I mean?
Oh my God.
And so I have this like spin-off podcast of the Age of Magical Overthinking called Magical Overthinkers. And yes, oh my God.
I would love to be a guest on that. Oh my
I
God.
feel perceived. Let's do it. But
Happy 1 year, by the way.
Oh my God, you're so funny. Like, thank you so much. It's like a small podcast, but I love the
200,000
listenership.
followers.
Yeah.
But no, it's like, you know, it gets,
Wondery just bought us. It was just super tiny.
no, really. I mean, like not no, but no. Also, like I don't know. I'm being cagey about my podcast downloads, but anyway, we did do an episode called "Overthinking About Crushes," and my guest on that episode was a therapist who specializes in OCD because, like, I was just there's a lot of magical thinking and magical overthinking involved with OCD, and she, you know, talks a lot about like relationship OCD in her work, and I was just like so interested in how we engage in like limerence, you know that term?
Oh
Or,
my
I
gosh.
don't, actually.
Yes.
yeah. This
What is that,
kind
witty
of-
banter? Is that another word for witty banter? No.
That is what it sounds like. It means a kind of like overwhelming, distracting, borderline toxic romantic obsession with someone from afar.
Yes,
I wanted
divine.
to.
It's
like that. I'm
intoxicating.
clocked.
It's like the
I'm
smell of
clocked.
magnolias.
Got it.
Well, okay, this is like a little dark, but the moment I knew I wanted to do that episode was I found out that my most formative middle school theater camp crush had died of a fentanyl overdose. And I hadn't seen him in literally like I don't know, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
But like, you know how you always hold a candle for like your
Yeah.
that like really formative crush.
Yeah.
And like I was just like, I will always have like a parasocial, like nostalgic crush on him, like from the grave, you know?
Yeah.
And I was
Yes.
like, what is that? Like, I don't even know him, you know?
Yeah.
Like, why does like the human spirit lend itself toward that kind of obsession,
Yeah.
even when it's totally irrational? And I will say, like, sometimes it does serve you. It's not always a bad thing. Yeah.
I was going to ask, like, how is it? How do you have an idea as to, like, what about that longing for him or that way of holding space for him? Like, what do you think? What do you think that's soothing?
Well, more broadly, I guess I'll say that like magical thinking is such a profoundly human coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Like during times of crisis or loss, whether it's like broad and more global or deeply personal, we start, you know, we get less and less rational. You know, we want to attribute cause and effect that may not actually apply. We just want the world to feel more predictable and manageable. The book that taught me the term magical thinking was Joan Didion's memoir, The Year of Magical Thinking, and like the title
Yeah.
of my book is kind of like a nod to that. And she talks about, you know, throughout that whole memoir about how like in the aftermath of the unexpected death of her husband, she was engaging in behaviors like, you know, she refused to throw away his shoes because she thought that if she did that, you know, that he would never come back. And I think we, you know, like in so many corners of life, we engage in kind of magical thinking like that as a way to just like cope existentially with so much of the unpredictability in this life. And I think that can be honestly like a beautiful thing.
Except for Juan, because Juan lives on Earth.
Oh,
Juan
yeah,
lives on
please.
Earth.
Oh,
and
how
he
is it
doesn't-
there?
Oh no, oh gosh, Ian is coming for me because I come for his wig weekly on certain topics when I'm perhaps
Because I can
overly
get a little
realistic.
woo-woo. I can
Yeah,
be
he
a
can get
little
a little woo-woo.
And like conspiracy, law of attraction, and just you
That's
never know. And like,
yeah,
but
he's
there's
a little
world
Suzanne
where-
Summers from
Yeah,
time
yeah,
to
yeah.
time. You know what I mean? it can get a little. I wish it is it. And I deal in cash. No. No, I mean but I think to this idea, I actually was thinking about this in the shower as I was magically overthinking, getting ready for this. I was like, you have done something with this book, and it is in a succinct, elegant, funny, endearing way, like made AP Psych tolerable.
Yeah.
And you've made it easy to see all the ways that we trap ourselves in our own minds sometimes.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like, I guess 100 years ago, yes, we are overthinking for sure. I think that people were also overthinking 100 years ago, except they were just called hysterical and truly crazy,
sure.
and they were fed opium and sent to their summer home to make it through winter alone.
Yeah.
And I think that we are now. You've given us the language to kind of process these natural weird brain
Quirks,
holes we get caught
yeah.
in. But the other thing I was just going to say is that the thing about overthinking is that it's also a gift to be able to get lost in your mind a bit and really explore. There is a luxury in being able to daydream and get confused.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. Yes,
there's something to that too. But of course, it can be too much. But
it is both same, and that sort of like push pull between feeling resentful of this digital age, but also grateful for it. There is genuinely no other time that I would prefer to live.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I absolutely, if we're, zooming out, which I love to do, to 100 years ago, I certainly think that people were overthinking. But if we zoom out to 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 years ago, I don't think people were overthinking. Why? Because everybody died by falling off a cliff or like an infection, eaten by a monster. Right. Thank you very much. And so
a four-headed hydra, okay?
The four-headed hydra would come and get you.
Yeah.
And so you're absolutely right. There is an incredible luxury in having the time and space that technology has afforded us to think and dream. And, I there is a balance when it comes to overthinking because it has, been destructive in my life at times.
Same.
But there is absolutely a luxury in it and a great responsibility in it. And, in the intro to the book, I reference this Marxist philosopher, Frantz Fanon, who said something, I'll try to quote the what he said verbatim, but it was something like, every generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. And I personally think that our generation's mission has to do with the mind. Like, we are living in this ever disembodied age when so many of the survival concerns that plagued humanity since the dawn of our species are no longer most at least us living in the privileged Western world. Like, our most urgent threats are more abstract than that. And so being able to understand exactly. And so being able to understand like the mind's innate limitations and what is at work up there is, I think, part of our generation's shared mission.
Yeah. I love
Perfect
that.
for me, because I could talk about like why we think this way and the tangent and then this and that. Like, you're such a perfect guest for this podcast.
Oh my goodness, so much
you're
so.
literally like I was saying to them before when we had a little production meeting. I can picture you being like our, like coming back to discuss, whatever.
Oh wait,
like,
sorry, I didn't dress up properly. Normally, I love a costume. Like,
Oh my
if you want me
God.
we're ready.
Those are very Aussie.
It's like, would you like? Yeah. Thank you so much.
the wizard will
Yes.
see you now.
Do I look moodified and deitized?
absolutely.
But I'm just like, no, it is funny. It is funny how people want to listen to you more when you're wearing glasses.
Oh,
what
yes, they
cognitive
do. Or if
bias
you-
is that
or if you have
you
a
can't
British
even
accent.
see my. That's right.
Yeah.
And why? Because we have mommy issues with our colonizers.
Because Beyonce can't talk back to us.
Oh my God.
I have to
yeah.
say one thing about your book and this book that surprised me, because it kind of caught me by surprise both times, is how you talk about love and romance and the relationships you've been in through the book. Both times was kind of like a gut punch because I wasn't expecting it. One in a bad way and the other in like the best kind of gut punch ever.
No.
Wow. The way you speak about the men in your life is it's so illuminating, and I think it's something we've all gone through. It was very much like holding a mirror to everyone. You were being very much like an every person in the way you talked about love, especially like for those who haven't read the book, at 18 years old you entered a relationship with a significantly older man.
Yeah, he was 29 and I was in high school.
Yeah. And so what that looks like and what that actually is, and what it does to to a young person, and to kind of it really made me think about. I think sometimes I become so open-hearted and minded and like, oh yeah, age is just a number, life experience, who cares? It's anything. But that's actually not necessarily true.
Yeah.
Like I think I overestimate how much the heart and a young heart and a young brain can endure. And to see how you wrote about that, I mean, it was tragic, and yet I could just see you like walking around. I went to NYU, and I could just see you kind of walking around Washington Square Park, like forlorn, but seemingly satisfied because you had this love affair.
Yes.
And wow, I mean, really. And then to then see as you process, and to see you grow up, your experiences as a journalist and a beauty editor, and then all of a sudden we get introduced to this like angel who comes into your life, your husband to be.
Yes.
And part of the overthinking is we see you wrestle with your thoughts, and then we also see you find love in the book. And it's just a wonderful surprise to those who haven't read it. It's amazing to watch.
I appreciate that so much. I have to express such gratitude for y'all bringing up like the more personal parts of the book, because writing nonfiction, and I have no complaints about this whatsoever, but a lot of the time, like, when I talk about my work, people want me to kind of like give a little TED talk,
Yeah.
And that's fine. I love to learn. I love to share. Like that's my whole MO. But the parts of this book that were in many ways most difficult and most satisfying to write were the more personal parts. And those were the parts that required, the most craft and the most vulnerability. So thank you for like pointing them out, because I took so much care in those moments, and they were scary. The contents in which I write about that relationship that I was in with that much older man when I was a teenager, and then until I was 25, I was talking about the sunk cost fallacy, which is our tendency to think that resources already spent on an endeavor justify spending even more. So it's like, I've already watched like 10 seasons of Grey's Anatomy, and I'm like,
let's
not
keep
interested
on keeping
anymore,
on.
but let's keep going. Yeah.
Yeah.
And sunk cost fallacy is like more often than not discussed in the context of economics, but it really applied to, first of all, the cult survivors and their stories that I was writing about in my second book, and then so very much to my own experience in that cult of one relationship that I was in, and being able to see it through that lens. And I found this really fascinating paper by a philosopher named Ryan Duty. Moment of silence for that last name, but it's like, we're like talking about something so serious, and it's like his name,
Mr.
is
Duty
Ryan
to the stage.
Mr. Duty, sir. Can you please explain
Give
this
us your TED
behavioral?
Talk.
Literally, yeah. He wrote this paper called "The Sunk Cost Fallacy Might Not Really Be a Fallacy at All," and he talks about how it makes sense that as social creatures, we as humans would be incentivized to honor the choices that we've already made, so that we will look, dependable and reliable to the people that we want on our team in the game of life, that we, can predict what will make us happy, that we can, that we're basically not a loose cannon.
Right.
So even though I made a lot of irrational choices in that relationship, specifically with regard to like ignoring red flags and ignoring miseries and just staying, understanding like the sort of, I guess, like social psychological mechanisms at play was healing. Writing that chapter was like so scary, and at first I wanted to include it like toward the end of the book, but my editor encouraged me to put it sooner.
Yeah.
And she also encouraged me to make Casey, my partner, more of a character in the book, and he's the best.
Speaking of that kind of love and loss and gained and love it reminds me of what you were just saying about like years and years and years ago we were just falling off of cliffs, and we're still falling off of cliffs in our brains sometimes because you're like, I'm doing this in order because I we're doing what we think is right, and
Such a good way of putting it.
that's also what's so great about your books is that I will say, like, having Make America Great Again people in my family, reading Cultish really helped me cope and also talk and also forge a new way in order to try and like understand people in a way that isn't so black and white. And that's I think the books that you're writing and what the work that you're doing is so special that way, because it is, like you said, our generation's mission is to deal with the mind, and that's basically what's going on with us every day. So I really have to say this has been so wonderful to talk to you about this stuff, and I can't wait for the next book. I have to read Wordslut. That's the one I have not written.
Yes.
I want to read all of them now for sure.
But yeah, I'm so excited, and I'm so happy for you and what you're doing.
This has been the best.
Next time we have to talk Elizabeth Holmes. Next time.
Do or do not. There is no try.
Do not. Yeah. I've got a lot of stuff that I'm working on.
I'm dead.
I love a scammer girly. I really do.
Oh my God.
I'm an aspiring scammer girly.
Yeah. I have very much
I'm
respect
joking.
for the scammers. Like I have like I can't stand a scammer, but I'm also like, you ate that.
What?
I know. Oh, well, the overconfidence bias chapter in the book is called The Scammer Within. And I'm always, it's like, it contends with imposter syndrome. Like, I think anyone who's ever, like, achieved anything, anyone in their right mind who's ever achieved anything is like, am I a scammer?
Am I a scam? Did I scam?
Am I
wake
Elizabeth
up,
Holmes?
You're waking up next to your person and you're like, oh my God, I love them. Did I scam them into being into the No.
Literally.
Yeah.
I'm just like, who have I like pulled wool? Whose eyes have I pulled wool over?
Oh, and that's good because it keeps you
Nar.
grounded and it keeps
Yes.
you, from getting crazy and yeah.
Yeah, I think it's healthy to hate yourself a little bit.
A little bit.
For sure.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Your neurosis is not a glitch, it's a feature.
Oh.
Correct.
Love that. Should we turn that into a rhyme? Your neurosis is your
Neurosis
I am way too brain foggy.
I mean,
Yeah,
glitch not a
neurosis is
feature.
your-
Like sounds really nice. Like glitch.
It does.
I can't own that.
That's always been a good.
That's a turn of phrase, but I love that. We're gonna circle back on your neurosis is your
Neurosis.
neurosis.
Neurosis, halitosis. Yeah, I don't know. We're gonna have to workshop it.
That's too hard. I'm gonna go to rhymezone.com and
Your
figure it out.
crazy
I have
is
to-
amazing.
Ooh, yes. Honestly,
So dumb.
all you have to do is like give a little bit of an anecdote of something that's going bad with you, but with humor, and then finish it with that, and then you've got
Be like, my crazy is amazing.
new audio unlocked right there.
Exactly. Oh my gosh.
We'll keep workshopping that one. I'm
Yeah.
excited. Beautiful.
Amazing.
Wow.
Well, thank you
Amanda.
so much for
Thank
taking
you,
the time out on
Amanda.
this very busy and important week. We're very excited for our listeners to hear you. And go get the books.
Happy wedding. Oh,
Go
yeah.
stream the podcast. There's 2 podcasts
Learn.
out
Open
now.
your mind.
Yeah.
And we'll
Thank you.
We'll talk soon.
¡Qué rico!